Hey everybody, I have an exciting update to share. First off, I want to thank you for being a part of this show. This is one of my favorite things that I get to do, and your feedback that I receive on almost a daily basis is truly wonderful. Okay, ready for the update? We're rebranding the podcast. Currently, it's the Vertical Go-to-Market Podcast. The new name will be the Deep Specialization Podcast. We're doing this for a couple of important reasons. Number one is we've gotten great feedback on episodes that feature specialists of all types, and not just those who specialize in a vertical market. With this new name, we'll be able to interview all sorts of amazing specialists who are doing things we can all learn from. This includes specialists in SEO and PPC and e-commerce and SaaS and more. Number two is deep specialization is the term I use to talk about the right way to specialize. It's the intersection of focus, strategy, and customer intimacy. I talk a lot about it in my new book, and you'll start seeing more deep specialization content from me everywhere. Okay, so what's changing? In addition to interviewing amazing guests, you're going to start hearing from me directly. I'll be sharing my strategies, tools, and tactics with you on solocast episodes. What's not changing? It'll still be me bringing in fantastic experts who can teach us all how to specialize in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm excited to bring it with you. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks again for being a part of the show. Welcome to the Vertical Go-to-Market Podcast, where you'll discover new opportunities to grow your business from 7 figures to 8 from the world's most successful agency and B2B SaaS executives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Today, I'm joined by the author of the best-selling book, Giftology, and the founder of the Rulon Group, John Ruhlin. Welcome, John.
Hey, Corey, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am so excited to have you here. I've been an admirer of your work. You wrote a groundbreaking book about the power of gifts and gift giving in business that sold like 75,000 copies, which is amazing for a business, sort of a B2B or a nonfiction book, especially self-published. I read it many years ago, and I've applied a lot of the principles in the work that I do. And I'm just so excited to bring you on the show to let the listeners who may not have heard about your book and about the work you do benefit from it as well. So thanks again for coming on, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, well, you've been living it for a long time, so everything we're going to talk about is in your DNA. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but we're going to go deep and go fast.
I really want to start by asking you, how did your gift-giving journey begin?
Well, it wasn't how I grew up. I grew up on a farm, 47 acres, milking goats every morning. So I wasn't around a lot of country clubs or nice gifts or like the Emmys. I grew up in Ohio. But I think that when you grow up poor or you grow up with lack of options, it inspires creativity, right? Because you're like, I don't have money to throw at this. I don't have connections to throw at this. So early on, I was in undergrad to go to med school. I was dating this girl, and her dad was this attorney, and he was like insanely like successful. But I also noticed he was super generous. So like when you're poor, you're like, why is that guy giving away all these things? And because of how he showed up for people, people flocked to him from referrals, deal flow. Like everybody that had an idea, came to Paul, attorney Paul. And so that was really unusual. So I remember I interned with Cutco, the crazy knife company. I had no idea what Cutco was, but a buddy of mine was selling them. And so if anybody thinks they have a hard like sales job of like selling like insurance or agency work, like imagine pitching our girlfriend's dad knives. Like that's about as weird as it gets, right? So Paul buys himself a set and buys his 3 unmarried daughters a set of these knives, drops like $5,000 on knives, and then comes back to me. This is just who he was. He said, John, I want to help you hit your goals. But the stuff, Cutco is actually really good. It's handmade in New York. It's like the Rolex of cutlery. I don't know what else I can buy. So I come back to him a week later. So, pitching girlfriend's dad knives again, super weird. And I'm like, he has all these clients that are CEOs of like financial advising companies, lumber yards, insurance companies, you name it. And they're all dudes that love hunting and fishing in the outdoors. I'm like, maybe Paul will buy these $200-$300 pocket knives that Cutco has. And so I make my pitch again. I'm sweating bullets before church on a Sunday morning. And like, Paul's like, I don't want to buy the pocket knives. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get it. Pitching it twice in a week. He's like, no, actually, I want to buy something else. He's like, I like the idea, but I want to buy 100 of these, $200-$300 paring knives. And I'm like, Paul, like I'll sell you as many paring knives as you want, but I had like this deer in the headlights look. I'm like, why would you give a bunch of dudes like a kitchen tool? And I'm 20 years old. I'm a country bumpkin. And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals, deal flow, access, all these things you want in business is because I found out that a simple truth, and that's if you take care of the family in business, everything else seems to take care of itself. So for me, I started to understand immediately, it wasn't about the stupid knives, although to this day on the agency side, we still sell millions of dollars in knives 23 years later. But the knife was a delivery vehicle for this emotional connection. And I started to understand Paul wasn't this big publicly traded firm. He couldn't, spend $20 million on advertising, but what he could do was go build these amazing relationships and use what we now call artifacts to stand out and to draw people in and to create reciprocity. And Paul was a master at it just intuitively, but I started to kind of reverse engineer what he was doing. And as this 20-year-old college kid, I started to get meetings with $200 million companies. And by the time I was a senior in college for Cutco, because people were like, John, does this really work? That sounds like a cool academia idea of just give gifts and be generous and gift creative things. Cutco's worked with about 2 million sales reps in 70 years. We became their number one sales rep in the history of the company out of 2 million reps. So at that point, I was like, I ain't going to med school. I'm not going to go spend another 12 years in school and $500,000 in debt. I decided nobody's teaching this and nobody's doing it. There's swag companies, whatever else. But we started to realize we're going to become the expert at how to use high-level, unique, creative, physical goods to deepen relationships, open doors, 10x referrals, do all of these things that people want to have the results in business. But we were going to use it through what we now call giftology.
And so that sets you on your journey. Now that you consult with businesses and you help them with their gift giving, what does a healthy gift giving strategy look like for a business?
Yeah. Well, most people, if you look at them, even let's call it a $5 million company, not a huge company, but maybe they're creating a great lifestyle for their family and their kids and whatever else. If you ask them, do you have a financial plan? Most people would say, yeah, I have some sort of financial plan. Yeah, so what's your operation plan? Oh yeah, I got a COO, or you ask somebody what's your relationship plan? And most of the time it's deer in the headlights look of what are you talking about? I'm like, well, most businesses, whether you're 5 million, 50 million, or 50 billion, rise and fall in one thing, and that's relationships. Could be relationships with employees, could be relationships with programmers, investors, mentors, advisors, centers of influence. I don't care what industry you're in, even with AI, it still comes down to the human-to-human connection. And people forget that. And so when you ask them what their if relationships are going to make your business rise and fall, how you show up for those relationships, whether that's your wife or husband, if you don't have a plan for how you're going to love on and take care of your spouse, somebody else will take them away. Same with your client. If you don't have a plan on how you're going to love on, show appreciation, show gratitude. And so most people default to transactional things. Hey, we closed $1 million deal. Here, we're going to go on a trip. Well, that's not a gift. That's an incentive. Hey, we do this, we send you a referral. I want to do a gift. Well, that wasn't a gift. That was a tit for tat. That was a give to get. So people don't understand the psychology of how they're showing up for their relationships. And most people will spend a lot of money on sponsorships and advertising and marketing and travel and hunting trips and ball games. And guess what? So do your competitors. Everybody's having a pissing match. My Morton's dinner is better than your Morton's dinner. My suite at the ball game is better than your suite at the ball game with the other 200 people. There's no differentiation in how you're showing gratitude and deepening the relationships in most cases. Why is my $300 bottle of wine better than your $300 bottle of wine? And so what we realized with relationships is you got to find those areas where most people either are going cheap or not at all. And most people, when they're doing gifting and gratitude, physical gifting, they're taking their clients to the Four Seasons and the Morton's dinner. They're not going to McDonald's. And then those same relationships they're dropping 10 grand on, they're giving them some sort of $50 polo with their logo on it. One is a level 10 and one is a -2. And so from a relationship plan perspective, you need to map out and say, how much is these relationships worth? If I lose this employee or these employees, what's it cost me to hire them? Well, it costs me 2 times their salary. Well, damn, I better start showing up for those employees a little differently. Because every time I lose one, it costs me 200% of their salary. And most people, last time I checked, aren't bragging about their health insurance or 401k that cost a small business owner $20,000, $30,000. Nobody's like, oh my gosh, you offer health insurance. So we started to think about even with our own team and coaching our clients, what are the things you could do for them that would make them feel loyal and feel different about the relationship? And so all of our employees at Giftology, we pay for house cleaning every other week. Costs us $3,000 per employee, but they brag, 1,000 times more. We get 1,000 times, literally, more energy and effort from that than most companies get from their health insurance that costs literally 20, 30 grand. It's 1/10 the cost, 100 times to 1,000 times the impact. And so that's the interesting thing about the psychology of humans. Like if you reached out and like you got a $500 billboard, or whatever for a day, like people are like, who cares? But if you send somebody a $500 gift that's personalized to them, that's like, holy crap, like a Mont Blanc pen or the Cutco knives engraved or whatever it is, people respond differently to the same $500 spent over here that's kind of noise and marketing and who cares. But a $500 package shows up that's personal to them and their family or their kids or their pets. We call that the inner circle. It doesn't make sense. Like that person could go buy their own $500 thing, the lawyer, the CEO, the director of marketing. But for whatever reason, when you get that, you're like, you feel differently and you feel indebted to them. So like, wow, these guys, everybody says they're different. Everybody says they're best in class. But when that shows up, it's like, well, maybe they really are because they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. And so that, when I talk about a relationship plan, it's like looking at all the buckets: employees, clients, prospects, centers of influence, referral sources, and making it a math equation so that you can say, like, I did $5 million last year. I profited $1 million. I'm going to reinvest 10% of my net profits back into that. That means I have 100 grand to reinvest back into those relationships. Whereas most people, it's like, we made money. Hey, Susie, take our list of relationships, divide it by this $10,000 I'm going to give you. And everybody ends up with a freaking calendar.
Yeah.
Right?
Been there.
And so most people aren't strategic with how they're showing up for relationships. And it's really costing them a lot of money.
So I think the interesting reframe there is that it's not a gift giving strategy. It is a relationship plan or a relationship strategy that is just as important as these other plans or strategies within a business.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, people don't care about gifts. Like nobody's like, oh my gosh, I want to have a gifting strategy. What they want is they want more referrals. They want more leads. They want more revenue. They want more loyalty. They want some sort of result. And I tell people all the time, do you really care what we're sending? Like if I could send out gerbils and it produced an extra $1 million for your business, you'd send out gerbils because you're like, I don't care what we're sending or what we're doing. Yeah. I just want to grow my company. I want the outcome, whether that's revenue growth or referrals or whatever it is. And so many times people are like, John, this is weird. It doesn't make sense. Like we just literally, one of our clients, the Jacksonville Jaguars, sent out a gift. And it was knives, but it was like a $10,000 gift. And like the COO was like, this guy like runs one of the largest construction companies in the country. We're really going to send him. He just took me to one of the nicest golf courses in the world. We're going to send him knives. I'm like, Chad, you don't understand. It's not about the knives. We're going to make him feel seen, and we're going to tie it to his faith and his family. We're going to tie it to his core values. The knives, who cares about the knives? He can buy his own knife set. But I'm telling you, and it's going in this $3,000 wood box with a video screen. He's like, John, you worked with us for 10 years or 12 years. I'm not sure about this, but you've never steered us wrong, so we're going to do it. Last night, I got a text from him saying, with the comments from the CEO founder, and it was like, most thoughtful, it's maybe the nicest gift I've ever received. Now, he's been in business for 40 years.
Right. I'm sure I've received many gifts over the years.
And go, private, go to Pebble Beach, private, go to Golf Augusta. Like think about like people will spend tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars on one experience, the Super Bowl or the Final Four, whatever it is. But it was not the thing. The thing just was the delivery vehicle for that emotional connection of like, wow, this guy gets me and my kids and my family and my legacy and my dad who started the company and all of that. So like people, when you get to that level of like emotional connection, it sounds woo-woo, but like we're emotional beings.
It's real. It's kind of taking off the mask. But I don't want to overlook the fact that what you sent was, based on the story you shared, some amazing knives and an experience that was very personalized. What about that created that emotional reaction?
Well, first off, the box is called a strong box. It's based on a 200-year-old concept of like a captain on a train or a ship. They would have this thing. They used to be small. They're size of like a loaf of bread. But you put like your jewelry, your diamonds, whatever the most valuable thing on that with wealthy people would go in this strong box. It had cast iron on the outside. Well, we made one like 10 times bigger. And so there's a story of that, of like legacy and like you're going to put your valuable things in this, whether that's watches or your kids' pictures or notes that you got from your kids or your wife or husband. So that delivery vehicle is really unusual, right? Like most people, it's like ship it in a box. Who cares?
Right.
It's like, no.
Right. What's the cheapest delivery vehicle I can get it across? Maybe I can throw my logo on it.
And yeah, so there's the Jaguars, the logo adds value to a lot of, their logo actually can add value to a thing, whereas most people's logos take value away from the thing and make it tacky, cheap. But in this case, no logos, you're right. Beautiful wood box, personalized to him. He opens it up. We built the video screen into it. Now it's the COO speaking life and encouragement of like, I really appreciate not your business. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your partnership. I appreciate just who you are as a man. We have to spend 3 days together, all this other stuff. So that sets the tone for like, before you don't even know what's in. It's like kind of like Tiffany's. Tiffany's done a great job of that emotional connection. If you get the Tiffany's box, you're excited.
The blue box. Yeah.
You might be getting a spoon or a 5-carat ring, but you're excited because it's Tiffany, right? Because of the box has value to it. And most people don't think through the emotional details of like, I don't want to make the video. I don't know what to say in the video. I don't want to spend $3,000 for a box. I'm like, do you realize like these relationships are worth 8 figures to you or 7 figures to you? Like, you probably should like think through some of the details, like, right? Otherwise, don't do it at all. Like the amount of people that just want to check the box and send out crap. And they're like, John, I did Giftology. And I'm like, tell me the recipe you followed. And they're like, well, we sent some stuff at Christmas from Amazon. I'm like, dude, you didn't follow Giftology. Barely Giftology-ish. Like, you're not going to get the results and the outcomes if you don't follow. It's like, baking bread. You better put yeast in or don't expect bread. And then on the knives, each knife had a different scripture verse because he's a man of faith, or it had like, he loves, he's a big Gators fan. So it had Florida Gators stuff on it. It had all things that were tied to heritage, legacy, faith, core values, family. So the tools, every tool you pull out, now it's a conversation piece because where do most people gather with their loved ones, their inner circle, their family, their close friends, their close employees? Everybody, whether you live in Florida or Africa, you gather around the dinner table, breaking bread even in 2024. And so now these tools are conversation piece and joggers and triggers of like the relationship. So now the client is going to be thought of at least once a day for the next probably 20, 30 years. Well, that's 10,000 thoughts. What would you pay to have your most valuable relations think about you positively, subconsciously and consciously, and have this emotional connection and be like, do you ever have relationships where you're like, I like this person, I don't even know why. Like I have these emotions connected to them, I don't even know why. And a lot of it is how they've shown up and what they've done and the experiences that you had, and you don't even remember some of those things, but you know how that person makes you feel. Sounds cheesy, but it's true. And so each of these tools, it was, set that had like, 40 different knives in it. So it wasn't like, the set from, people were like, oh, John, I gave knives. I'm like, you order a set from Walmart or like Target. Like you're giving it to somebody that lives in a $2 million house. You at least make it the nicest knives you can find. And even then, like, unless you personalize it to them, it's just a thing. You might as well give them a vacuum cleaner. But if you personalize it to them and now you have an heirloom. Like think about, like we've had things go out to people, and you think about if your house was on fire and you're going to only be able to grab a few things, you don't grab the most expensive things. You grab the things that have the deepest story and meaning to you. So it might be the flag of your dad who served in the military. It might be pictures, kids, or like. And we've had people that have like said, John, if my house is on fire, this is one of the things that you gave me or that the client gave me. I'm going to grab that. And it's not because it's the most expensive. It's because I feel like it's irreplaceable in the story and the meaning behind that. And if somebody's grabbing something and their house is on fire, like you've gone past its marketing and there's a place for all that swag and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a fire right out this window and we grabbed all the stuff. And
so
I
way.
know what that's like, right? We've had to make that decision.
Wow.
So
I never
it
had to
is
make
like,
that decision.
Right. I mean, it is what's the absolute things in our life that we would regret not having should a fire consume the house or whatnot. And so that's transformational. That's getting away from the transactional, right? Diving into some details, like what must be true for it to be a great business gift to help really build the relationship and to reinforce it.
During COVID is a great example. Like the amount of people that went to Goodwill during COVID, and like there's a mile long line at a lot of Goodwills because people had the time to go through all the crap in their house. And they're like, I don't need all these things I'm dusting. I don't need 14 different water bottles. I need one really nice thing. And a lot of the stuff is just stuff. I'm keeping it because I have room for it maybe, or it's in a closet. And so to me, like, people don't need more stuff to put on a shelf and hang on a wall. Like most people's walls are full. Most people's closets are full. So it's better to give something that's functional and practical, but it needs to be best in class. Imagine if you're given a watch and you're like, oh, John, I got $1,000. I'm going to give this tag hewer to this guy. Well, if the person's wearing a Rolex that's 10, 20, 50 grand, it might be the nicest tag hewer or Seiko on the planet. But guess what? They're not taking that you're not taking the Rolex off to wear your Seiko, especially if it has your logo on it. And you're proud of it, right? You're like, I'm giving $1,000 or $2,000 gift. But not understanding the level that most people are playing at that you're trying to take care of. And so best in class in that category, or go to a different category. I mean, one of the reasons Yeti dominated, especially 10 years ago, was nobody had ever seen, like most people had a $50 cooler and you sent them a $500 one and it's 10 times nicer than the Igloo. And I don't care if you made 50 grand a year or $5 million a year, you probably had an Igloo or Coleman or whatever the thing was. And so they created this category of like, no, you can get a cooler that will last the ice 7 days and all the craziness. And so that is a category where you could spend half the cost of the Seiko watch and have 100 times more impact because it was best in class in that category. And it's not, like if you give out 1,000 of something, that's where people are like, John, I gave out the gifts and somebody was complaining. The client, I'm like, you could give out Ferraris and at least 5 people out of 1,000 are going to be like, I wanted yellow and you sent me red.
Yeah, I've had the same thing with video brochures. I mean, you're familiar with these, obviously.
Yeah.
And we sent these out to law firms. And, some percentage come back and they say, how dare you send us this environmentally unfriendly brochure? And it's like, okay, yes, you're right. It's probably not the most environmental, but that was not our intention type of thing.
No, like it's creative and it's fun. And
yeah.
And, like, let's analyze somebody's life. Are you drinking out of plastic water bottles ever? You haven't in the last year? Like, get the heck out of here. Like people, that's the thing especially when you're cold marketing, is you have to have a certain amount of thick skin and know that.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
You're showing up to people maybe on their worst day. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe their kid's sick. Maybe their dad passed away. And you're showing up creative and fun and playful and unique.
And generous and full of gratitude and, really, genuinely interested in connecting. And regardless, despite that, you run the risk of just, like you said, like humans are humans, right? You're going to get some people that are just not going to be receptive to it, won't see the message you're trying to deliver.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have now all of these rules are meant to be broken, but sometimes people are like, John, just give me the list of like the things not to give. Because like if you just avoided most of those, in a lot of cases, you'd be in the top 5% of gift givers. Now prospecting, you can get away with some of these more often than you can on the client side, because if somebody has a relationship with you, you're already in partnership relationship with, you should be doubling down and not sending. But like food is on the list, alcohol is on the list, gift cards are on the list. If your audience wants to go deliver, before they buy the book, they just want to test out some of the things we're thinking about. Giftologyplan.com will give them the 10 worst gifts to avoid and a couple articles with some of our points around what makes a great gift, what doesn't. Because, we're going to cover a lot on this podcast, but we're not going to cover the whole book and the whole plan and everything. I'll give as much as we can. But knowing what not to give, like people are like, John, I love food. And I'm like, why is food on there? I'm like, well, last time I checked in 2024, everybody has a food allergy or is on a cleanse or a diet or
some diet, yep.
Whether it's sugar or gluten or like, you name the thing. And here's the other thing. When in marketing, you're trying to get as many impressions as possible. You send a $50 thing of cookies or a $100 thing of oranges or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's cheaper than your $500 Yeti or knives or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But how many times do they think about you? Once. Whereas, the Yeti, the knives or whatever, like when somebody's thinking about you every day for the next year, that's 365 thoughts versus one thought. The person who's most liked, trusted, and top of mind is going to win. And you're not top of mind because the cookies are gone, even if they liked them. Or maybe they gave them away or threw them away because they're not doing sugar in January or December. Or you gave them alcohol and their dad's an alcoholic. Or so like there's all of these nuances of like what you should be looking out for. And so we try to at least coach people on like avoid this stuff if you want to have like those long-term impressions and have people feel a certain way.
Reminds me of a client of mine who sent out. So the target audience was mold remediation companies, and they found this super interesting high end flashlight that it's likely that the founder, the owner of the company, probably wouldn't have spent money for. They'd love to have it, but it's not something they would typically spend the extra dollars for.
It's like a $400 flashlight or some crazy like compact that's like Navy SEAL level.
Yeah, it's the Yeti version, and it's kind of like the status symbol, right? You flash that around the job site. You're like, oh, you got one of those type of thing, and that worked really well.
And why? Any one of those guys, if they really wanted to, could have bought the flashlight. But getting something that's best in class that they might not go out and splurge for, and you take it a step further, like everything that we send out is personalized, not with typically logos. It's with the person's name, their last name, their family name, or if it does have a logo, in that case, it's not the company that's sending it, it's the company that you're giving it to.
Right.
Because now they're like, do they care about your logo? No, like you'd never the example I give is you'd never go to your best friend's wedding on the beautiful Tiffany's vase. You'd never like engrave like compliments of Ernst & Young or compliments of UBS or compliments of Scorpion. It'd be the cheesiest thing in the world. But we do that in business and we think we're branding and marketing. But when you're giving an artifact level thing, if I give you a watch, Corey, do I need to put Giftology? If I give you a Rolex, do I need to put Giftology on it for you to remember?
No, because you're already attached to the gift.
Right. So that that $200, $400 flashlight, I hope they personalize it to the person, because now they're like, wow, they didn't even try to manipulate me and try to get their brand on it. They put mine on it. And now like they're really like the reciprocity kicks in of like, man, these guys are different. They're classy. This wasn't a promo item. This was like this is a tool for my business, like so powerful.
The thing that I love that you talk about, which is that the packaging, the experience, all around it's not just the knives or the flashlight. It is every touch point in relationship to this gift experience is a reflection of your brand, right? So if you are differentiating based on the fact that you are let's say a high touch, very bespoke, intentional brand that really cares about the details, you can't just send something that communicates the opposite. Everything you send has to be in alignment and reinforce that messaging.
Yeah, imagine if you go to this beautiful steakhouse that serves $100 steaks, and you go to the bathroom and it looks like somebody died in there. You immediately start questioning what's going on at the restaurant, right? Because you're like, if they don't pay attention to the bathroom, what's going on in the kitchen? Like, what are they really doing? And the brands are that same way. It's like, oh, they have amazing trucks, but the guy's like showing up, spit and dip in the yard, and like doesn't take his shoes off when he comes in the house. Like all of those things communicate either like first class, man, these guys are trustworthy, man, these guys are great. Same thing with a brochure, or a book. Like the amount of people that go cheap on, I would rather not have the brochure. Like that's why we did like the $3 metal business cards, because I'm like, I didn't want to spend $30 on a brochure that people are going to throw away. I decided to go down different paths and find the area where everybody went cheap, and I took it up not 1 or 2%. I took it up like 1,000%.
Right.
And now like the business card or the flashlight or the whatever all communicates, wow, these guys really do think differently. And now they're not putting you into a price comparison, because you're showing up as a consultant, you're showing up as an advisor, you're showing up as like somebody who's bringing real value to the table. But if you many people are like, oh, they're selling $1 million consulting and they're sending squish balls and stress balls and paperweights. And I'm like,
right. 70-cent pens with their logo on it, right?
Yeah, like this is like, you really think that communicates best in class, world class, first class? No, it's cheese ball.
Let's talk about timing. When's the best time to send employees or your best clients gifts?
Yeah, well, so I didn't invent this, but the Ritz-Carlton, one of their core tenets was surprise and delight. And yet, when do most people in business, when do they take care of their employees? After they've worked here 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Here's your gift. You've been here like 10,000 hours. Go pick something out of a catalog of crap you don't want from China. Like, it's horrible. Or, hey, we've been in business 75 years, very expected. Or we it's your birthday. Or like most of the time, in business, the times that we're showing up for our relationships are at expected obligatory times. Hey, you gave me a referral. Here's a gift. Well, that devalues the relationship, because most people, if you ask them if they're in the relationship business or the transaction business, people would say, oh, I'm all about relationships. Even if you're selling toilet paper, nobody says we're the worst product, but we sell it to the cheapest. So That's how we win. Like everybody's like, we're all about relationship and value and all of these things. And yet most of the time we completely ruin the opportunity to surprise and delight our relationship. So we say no ABC gifting. That's at a baseline. So no anniversaries, no birthdays, no Christmas. If you think about, I don't know how long you've been married, Corey, but I've been married 14 years. If I show up for my wife on Valentine's Day, birthday, Christmas, I don't earn any brownie points. Like those are expected. Like those are,
right.
Table stakes. Table stakes. But if I show up on a random Tuesday and say, hey, honey, I got the Four Seasons booked, spa, I got the 4 girls taken care of, like, and I'm not asking, I'm not expecting anything. Now, if you give a nice piece of jewelry and then expect something that night with your spouse, how does that work out? Probably not so well, because it wasn't a gift. It was a manipulation. So to me, the timing.
It's an
obligation. The timing is just as important as what you're sending. So when we're doing any sort of relationship plan, we're mapping out, twice a year, 4 times a year. And if one year we do a gift in February, we're not doing a gift again in February. We're going to do it in March. We're keeping them always guessing what's coming, when, and why. And that surprise element is how you have upside. Like if I told you, hey, Corey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be in town. I'm going to bring you some pizzas over to your house. In your head, you're thinking, I'm gluten-free. I don't like gluten. I'm on this cleanse right now. I'm not sure about cheese. But if I show up and you're like, man, my wife's sick. I didn't have time to get dinner. Hey, man, I got you some pizzas. I surprise you with them. You're just elated that I showed up with some food. I don't have to, you don't have to cook that night or whatever. And so the surprise element is how you can really take something that doesn't feel like that significant, but a physical gift shows up. And if you're not asking for anything, that's where most people, on the prospecting side, you're basically asking for their time. You're trying to pre-buy their attention. And that's legit, right? Because everybody wants their time and attention, and wants to pick their brain and has this great offer. You show up with a nice gift, now you're at least above everybody else that's just asking for their time for free.
Yeah, yeah.
On the client side, they're giving you money. On the employee side, they're already working for you. So finding those times that doesn't say, hey, we had a record profit year, or hey, you've been with us for 30 years. We're doing this because we wanted to, not because we had to. And you think about the relationships that show up for you because they wanted to, not out of obligation or expectation, those relationships flourish. Whether it's a client,
priceless.
It's priceless. So the timing, making it truly surprise and delight, if you get that wrong and you're like, I want to give Christmas gifts, I'm like, we own an agency that does gifts and we don't even let our clients send gifts at Christmas. Which is, for most gifting companies, it's like committing suicide.
Right, exactly. That's where the budget is.
But what do I care as an entrepreneur? I've had to bootstrap this business, and I'm now established. But whether I'm working with a Fortune 500 company or I'm working with a $10 million company, I want them to invest $1 and get $10 back. The only way you get that 10x or 100x return is by creating different emotional connections, and part of that is the surprise element. It's so crucial, and so many people are like, we're having a conference, we're gonna do a gift. I'm like, you're dumb. We're having a retreat, we're gonna do a gift. I'm like, you're dumb. No, pick those other times when you're not getting FaceTime with them to show up for the relationship.
Right.
Don't give them stuff at an event.
Yeah,
Mail
it's
it to their
going to a
house.
Conference, getting the swag bag. It's okay, no one ever looks at that. It's all throwaway, right? It's expected.
Yeah. Let's talk about being green. Anytime your law firm guys or anybody who's like, oh, we're, this is not green. Ask them if they've ever given out swag at an event, because most of that ends up left in the hotel room and ends up in the landfill by the train car load. It's disgusting.
It is horrible. And we never did that either, by the way. But I think that speaks to the power of giving a physical gift versus, let's say, an ebook or something that is digital. What is the power of a physical item?
Well, you think about if you go to Chipotle or Chick-fil-A, what do most people do? They look at the picture and they say, I want that. Why is that? Well, as a human, we're visual. And what's not in front of us and top of mind, is just kind of gets pushed out, and there's so much noise. If you think about, we were talking about TikTok and all these different things, the average person's bombarded with tens of thousands of messages a day between all of the different things that we see and texts and Facebook and emails and whatever else. Most people are overloaded. And so the beauty, why I don't like digital is digital used to be unusual 20, 30 years ago. Now it's everywhere. And now your mailbox is vacant, right? and so a physical gift shows up and it's sitting there, you have to do something with it. You have to, you're thinking about it, you're looking at it, it sits on your desk. most of the things that we're talking about, the reason 80% of our artifacts are tied to the home and kitchen and hospitality and family is, I don't want to be something that's in a closet. I want to be something that's out on the countertop. Like if you think about like, if you have something like a Vitamix or a knife set or whatever, and it's on the countertop, like that 1 square foot of space is very valuable real estate because everybody sees it every single day. And so I want to own that. I want them to see and their family to see. And so the physical element, like a digital book to me is lame. That's why when we originally published Giftology, I came out with $200, $300 versions of the book that were in leather bags and linen boxes. And my author buddies would be bragging about how cheap they were printing their book for. Like, I print my book for $3. I can print my book for $2. I'm like, dude, this is your Bible. This is supposed to be your life's work. And if you go into any executive's office, they have 37 books on their back stand or at their nightstand at home of books they should read. Most of them never get read. They're just paperweights. Well, how do you jump the stack? How do you jump the list? How do you get to the front of the VIP line? By showing up differently. And so I remember when we did 50 of these initially, they were $250 a piece. And I sent them off to like Seth Godin and John Maxwell. They were either clients, friends, or people I respected from afar. I hand wrote a note on a sheet of $10 letterhead that's steel. I didn't ask them for a promo. I didn't ask them for anything. Because if you send a gift and ask for something, like it's not really a gift.
Right.
And so it just said, hey, you inspired me. Here's where this book is an extension of you. I'm so grateful for you. So I send these off. They're all personalized on the cover as well. Like I had them hand monogrammed to them and their spouse. And in a leather bag, in a linen box, $250. My buddies are like, dude, you're gonna go broke with these stupid books. And I'm like, so I mail them off. And guys, I remember the response I got from Michael Hyatt. If you don't know who Michael Hyatt is, he was the publisher of Thomas Nelson Publishing for like 30 years. And he's now like a huge influencer, has a huge podcast, huge consulting firm. And he reached out and said, John, I get 4,000 to 5,000 books sent to me every year. And all of them, unless I have a really close personal relationship with the person, all of them end up at the library or I give them Goodwill. None of them get read. Your book is the nicest book I've ever seen. I read it, and my wife, Gail, has already read it, and I ordered 25 copies for my team. Oh, by the way, would you like to come on my show? I'd love to talk about what you're doing. Didn't ask for any of that. Now, how many business owners will spend $250 in 5 minutes on a bar tab at a conference on a Friday night?
In a heartbeat.
They don't think twice about even a $2,500 bar tab if it's their top people out in Vegas or a $10,000 dinner. Nobody remembers or cares. It's not that it's wrong. You're not hurting anybody necessarily. But in business, we're trying to look for like, where can I put $1 in and get $100 back out? Well, $250 on a book to the right person, like some of these relationships are worth 6 and 7 figures. So $250 is not even a rounding error. And so finding those areas where you can have this physical thing show up and have it be unlike anything that they've ever received, but you can't cut corners. People will try to mimic what we're doing and they'll do a giftology version of it and it looks junior varsity because the other person's already seen my book. So it's like you need, like, and we're always reiterating, that's where the $3,000 wood box, the strong box came from. I'm like, if I were to send my book out and have it be nicer than the $300 version, what would I do? And the original version couldn't hold a book. So I'm like, I need to make it bigger, and I want to add a video screen to make it more personal. And nobody ever doesn't comment when they receive a $3,000 book. Now, I don't send them out, I don't send 5,000 of them out, but I might send out 20 of them or 50 of them. And so that's like those areas of like physicality, of holy crap, of best in class. Like, when you do that, like the human spirit like leans in and says, wow, this is cool. And then it's a week later when they look at it again, they're reminded. So that physicality matters.
Agency owners, in 2024, do you want to finally escape founder-led sales? My book, Anyone, Not Everyone, gives you a unique solution to a big problem that digital agency owners face, serving too many types of clients. In my book, I guide you through my proven 5-step process, helping you to transform from a generalist to a vertical market specialist. The best part is the methods in this book are simple, authentic, and effective. It's been endorsed by well-known author Dr. Benjamin Hardy, legendary marketer Aaron Ross, positioning expert April Dunford, gifting expert John Ruhlin, as well as many leading agency owners and thought leaders. So whether you're a seasoned agency owner or just getting started out, my book, Anyone, Not Everyone, is your ultimate resource to unlock your agency's potential and scale revenue. The book launches in March, and the good news is that you can go to my website right now and sign up to be notified when it launches. You'll also get access to some early bonuses just by signing up to be notified today. Go to anyoneNotEveryone.com. That's anyoneNotEveryone.com. Now back to the show. I hope people are catching what you're putting out here, because this is amazing stuff. When it comes to thinking about, like, let's say a founder of a business and they want to deploy this type of relationship-based gift plan, how often should they be prepared to send a gift?
So to me, if it's your best clients, your employees, like, remember I said nobody needs more crap. So if it's just checking a box and sending somebody a Patagonia vest with their logo on it, like, don't do it. Redirect the money elsewhere. Like, unless you're like, so our plan is figure out the value of all your relationships, each of the buckets, employees, clients, investors, mentors, advisors, centers of influence, like all of those are different buckets. And then figure out the value of each of those relationships in that bucket, total, collectively. And then figure out, like, do you want to reinvest 10, 15% of net profit back into it, or 2% of sales, or whatever your metrics are. I like net profit, because sometimes companies have $1 billion in revenue. They're a mortgage company, but really their like profit was like $1 million or $2 million. I'm like, I don't care that you're $1 billion company. Let's play with real numbers here, because most people aren't publicly traded companies. They need to put $1 in, and they need to track that. They can't just have unlimited funds. And so to me, I would rather send out something that's world-class twice a year than send out 4 mediocre. So when we look at, a giftologist meets with a CEO or VP of marketing or a CMO or VP of sales or HR, we'll look at it and say, and if they say, hey, my budget's $500 a person, then I might tell them to just do one gift. Because that one thing, if it's best in class, if it's the flashlight or the whatever it is that's unique and personal and meaningful and holy crap to that person or those 100 employees, you're going to get way more longevity, because they're going to be like, wow, versus, well, I sent them, a polo shirt, and then I sent them a Harry and David basket, and then I sent it so to me, less is more. Now, if somebody's like, hey, I have these relationships, these 10 relationships, I could invest $10,000. Well, cool, then we'll do something 4 times a year. But in most cases, unless somebody's a prospect, we won't do more than 4 times a year, because it starts to feel on autopilot and automated and marketing. It's like the Jelly of the Month Club. It's like the Chevy Chase. Like, if it feels automated, you're not going to connect with them at a deep emotional level. So once a quarter, 4 times a year is great. But a prospect, I wanted to get Jeffrey Gitomer's attention one time, the big sales author. I sent him 18 gifts in 18 months. I mean, it was like pound. And after 18 months, I finally got the phone call. But that's different. There's no relationship there. You have to keep, the intensity, the frequency, all of that is dialed up. That's why, if you can turn as many of your clients into sales reps for your brand, that's a way cheaper way to grow. But if you want to grow faster, then you take the prospects, but don't go send in a shoe to get their foot in the door. Do some really cool over-the-top things, because every month that goes by that you don't have them as a client is lost revenue you'll never have ever again.
Yeah, that strategy of not just the super intentional, personalized, best-in-class gift, but also the duration and the frequency matters when it comes to prospecting. What I would do, what I talk to agency owners about, is do it once a quarter, and then be prepared to do it for 3 years.
We're on the same page. We didn't even talk about this, but the 3 years is the mark for any relationship.
Yeah. Right. And so the point is that you want to get that phone call. They're on that list. They're receiving this gift because you genuinely believe that you have the ability to really help that business to get to the next level. You genuinely want to get them on the phone because you want to help them. Well, then just shower them with this gift, this amazing gift, this experience every quarter. You're going to get that phone call.
Eventually, it might be 2 years in.
Eventually, that's fine. And then you have a large enough list, and the calls will happen.
Yeah, but you're not sending big pens and
don't even do it at that point.
No, that's where people are like, well, I'm doing a big list. I'm like, cut the list in half then. if you have
No,
to.
or 20% of that list. Find the gold in that list. How can this strategy be used to encourage referrals?
Well, I mean, referrals for a lot of companies is a core lifeblood for them. And most people are reactionary gifters, reactionary in anything. They wait for the thing to happen and then they reward it. And the challenge is that most people are like kind of like passively loyal. So they'll stick around as a client, but they're not like shouting on the mountaintops about like, oh my gosh, I love this person, because it's more of a transactional relationship. They expect you built their, you're a lawn mowing service and like you cut the lawn and do a good job, but they're paying you $200 a week.
Right, you're meeting expectations.
Meeting expectations. And so gratitude and generosity, if you're like, they're never gonna brag about, man, they cut the lawn, or man, their windows that they put in don't leak, or like think about the industry, or like the health insurance, like all of those things are very transactional. So if you think about like at a restaurant, you go and you spend $100 on a steak, but if the owner or the GM knows that your wife likes a certain kind of chocolate and makes a special dessert off the menu for you, and you just drop $400, $500 on a dinner, and you show up with this, what would retail for $20 dessert, but as a surprise for for your wife, that becomes the thing, the story. That becomes the impetus to tell 100 other people. Not the steak that was $100. Hey, you spent $100 on a steak, it better be freaking good. Spend $100 on a bottle of wine, it better be solid. And so finding those, and the gifting is one of those areas where most people, what do? They do expected obligatory gifting. Whereas if you took your centers of influence that could refer you business, or your clients that could send referrals, and you find those times to surprise and delight them with gratitude, with artifacts that are tied not to the deal, aren't tied to the referral, you could send it out. And that's where we had, like literally, like we have some clients, all their channel partners and all potential referral sources, they send out gifts once a quarter. It's not tied to the referral, the deal, it's tied to, I was just thinking of you. Now the knives show up and people are like, this is weird and awesome. Like I didn't do anything for this. I didn't send a referral, I didn't send a deal. But subconsciously in our heads, what are we now thinking about? These guys are great. I already like them. Now I kind of love them. I want to see them win.
This is like ninja level getting into their heads in a positive way, right?
Yeah,
this is so like.
Now, if your product or service sucks, gifting won't save you. You have to be like meeting the expectations. Like if you're like not meeting expectations and you give great gifts, then people are gonna be pissed and be like, why don't you just return my phone call or fix the faucet when you come over, or take my not have negative 60% returns on my stock portfolio. But if you're meeting expectations or close there, and you choose to reinvest 10, 15% of your net profit back into the people that are already giving you money anyway, and the centers of influence that could be sending you referrals, now you're priming the pump. And here's the key. You don't expect them. If you give the gift to the center of influence that could refer you business, or the employee or the client, and now you're expecting things that wasn't a gift, that wasn't given with an open hand, you're gonna ruin it. If you give the gift and then hold it over their head, now they feel manipulated, now you're damaging the relationship. And that's where a lot of people will be like, I give great gifts and I'm still not getting great. I'm like, well, check your intentions here. What are you communicating with? What's in the note? Are you hinting towards referrals in the note?
Right. Use this QR code. This reminds me a little bit of what Chip Conley talks about. He wrote a book called Peak. Chip Conley used to be the founder of a boutique hotel chain called Joie de Vivre. He was the chief experience officer over at Airbnb. He wrote this amazing book called Peak. And the premise of it is, or the crux of it is that when you meet an expectation, it's more transactional. But when, as a brand or as a service provider, you can meet their unexpected needs that they're unspoken. So the example of the couple that's at the steak dinner, the high-end steak dinner, when the manager stops by the table, that's not expected. It's nice, and they make the guests feel like they are, somehow like have status, right? And that's an unspoken need as we have as humans. When you send this amazing, unexpected, best-in-class gift, people feel recognized, right? That's an unexpected need that we have. When you're able to fulfill that, that's when you prime the pump, probably not the right term, but like that's when you create the opportunity for this sort of return of generosity in referrals.
Yeah. And it's just fun. And like, even if you just keep the client or grow with the client and they don't send you referrals, there's like, and that's why like you mentioned the 3 years. I'm like, don't do this for like 6 months and then go to do something else. Like this needs to be a commitment for at least 3 years, because it may take a little bit before like the reciprocity kicks in, or like maybe there were some unmet expectations that they didn't tell you about, or all of those things. But you start to like, there's a compounding effect of generosity. But on top of that, like it's just a reinvestment back of profit that you wouldn't have had you not had that relationship. So like you reinvest 10%, you're keeping 90%. Like that's still like a 10-to-1 ratio. Like you're still pretty good. But if you can treat it like a game of like, this is just fun. Like I just get like house money to play with here to reinvest back into relationships. Like it's, and then it takes the pressure off of like, well, this better return something in the next 2 months. It's like, no,
wrong mindset. I'd love to shift the conversation to the book. You mentioned that you talked about how you brought the book to market. You sold 75,000 copies of your book, Giftology. It launched in 2016. Did you know back then that the impact of the book would be so great?
I mean, we're hopeful, right? I mean, we had an agency. We'd heard, I have friends that have written books, like Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod. He sold millions of copies. We've been buddies for 20 years. Grew up in Cutco together. So I was around enough people, but at some level, when you write a book like that, gifting, there's no category. Like, it's not like there's 10 other books that have been successful, like with leadership or marketing and so like, I didn't know if more than my grandma and a few like loyal customers would buy it. Like there was a fear of like, does anybody gonna care? But I mean, the impact that it's had on the, like speaking, I remember begging to speak for free, and now like being paid, what my mentor would call adult money to be able to go and, speak at a YPO or Fortune. Like we just spoke for Sherwin-Williams, a $22 billion company. Like for a goat milking farm kid to be on those stages, like it doesn't make logical sense. But we've been doing it for now 23 years. But when I came out with it, the hope was it would drive lead flow. It would spread the message. It would equip people that maybe would never be a client of ours, but would give them the right tools to go, be able to practice this in their company, which has happened internationally, which is really crazy, multiple languages. And so, but the hope was, well, help me land some more speaking gigs. Will it land the agency some clients, and will it equip some smaller companies that would never be a fit for us? If somebody's doing $500,000 in business, they're probably not a fit for our agency. But I like the idea of giving back and being able to have a bunch of, 1 million people out there that are disciples of the concept, beating the drum. And hopefully, from a legacy perspective, I got 4 daughters. Like there is that element too of like, maybe this is a cool way to contribute and have be one of the things that is meaningful from a philosophy perspective, that if I got hit by a bus, they'd know a little bit about their dad and what I was about and what I cared about. So it's exceeded my wildest expectations. Yeah. Now, like, it's funny, and you probably see this, you get to that mountaintop and you're like, oh, there's another 10 peaks that are even taller. And so like, I'm not like settling. There's still an element of like, oh, I could take this 10 times larger and bigger and better and all of that. And
there's a ton more we can unwrap there and unpack about the book journey, particularly for an agency owner launching a book and the impact it's created. But for now, I'd like to just wrap up with a couple of last questions. Where should listeners get started with gift giving? If they've learned something here and they want to lean into this, where do they start?
Yeah, well, I would say you don't need the book. You don't need, maybe you go download the free download to avoid the 10 worst gifts. But take 30 days, take 3 minutes a day for 30 days, and write down 3 people that you're grateful for that contributed to where you're at in business today. It could be mentors, bankers, suppliers, employees, coaches, whoever it is. If you do that for 30 days, you're gonna have about 100 people on a list. And you start taking that list, and whether it's a physical gift, whether, the 5 Love Languages author, Gary Chapman, who sold 22 million books, Christian marriage book, by the way. He's a mentor and a friend. And, 5 Love Languages, physical gifts is one of those. But like, words of affirmation. Well, that's the handwritten note that you would give, or maybe it's the video that you send, or giving somebody a hug or shaking their hand is spending quality time with them. There's ways that you can combine all elements. You don't have to go drop 10 grand on a Rolex in order to show gratitude to somebody. But most of the time people feel gratitude, and I'm like, that's weak. Like, gratitude is meant to be expressed. Like, it's an action. And most people, they write their gratitude journal and then they do nothing with it. Like, I'm really grateful for this person. I'm like, great, go do something, acknowledge them, whether with a note, a video, a gift, something. But you do that for 90 people, you're going to start to get addicted to the impact and the response. Some people are probably going to cry because most people, whether they're a janitor or CEO, like, we're all human beings and we're all craving that acknowledgement and that gratitude and wanting our lives to have mattered. And I don't care if somebody's worth $1 billion, like, they still care about how they're impacting people. And so that would be the first step, is to take that, create the list, and then start doing something with it.
Beautiful. Last question. What's your motivation?
I mean, from a faith perspective, I feel like God's given me a lot of gifts, and he was given a lot, is expected of a lot, at least in my opinion. And I have 4 daughters to not only provide for, but to lead and to create, a vision of like what's possible. So from a purpose perspective, between faith and family, I know a lot of people say that, but that to me is, I felt that at an early age, like, it wasn't easy, but I always felt like God gave me some trials and tribulations, but also gave me some open doors and some mentors and some people in my life that I'm super grateful for. And so my goal is to pay it forward and pay it back and do something that ripples into eternity, which is a big goal.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your time here, John. I think you've definitely lived up to that goal in giving of your time and your wisdom and your advice here. I think it's been a really great episode. So thanks so much for coming on.
Corey, thanks for having me, man.
We'll talk soon. All right, folks, that's it for today. I'm Corey Quinn, and I hope you join me again next time for the Vertical Go-to-Market Podcast. If you receive value from this show, I would love a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.